Good afternoon, students. My name is Yuna Kariwo, and I am your tutor for the subject Learner Development and Learning. This is for the DPP and the DJP students. Okay, our subject code is DPP LDL21 and DJP LDL21 for the ones that are doing DJP and the ones that are doing LDL. So I'm responsible for the subject learner development, as I stated. Please, you are all welcome to the subject learner development and learning. As I stated already that I am your tutor. I have been a tutor for the past 2 years for this specific subject. I'm responsible for setting up your assignments, setting up your question papers, your exam question papers, as well as marking your assignments and marking your examinations. I wish you all to dedicate your hard work and commitment to this course. So let's go through the presentation of the 2019 exams. As you might already have been informed that this presentation it comprises of all the 3 exams of 2019. That is your April-May exams, your August exam, as well as the November supplementary exams. So the topics or the issues that I'm going to tackle now, it comprises of all the 3 exams. And I'm not going to specifically state which content will be in the April-May exam or which will be in the August or the November exams. Everything that I'll state here could be in any of those exams. So I'll start off now with part 1. All right. The important part in part 1 that I've highlighted there for you is the difference between growth and maturation. As a learner development student, you should know that when we talk about growth and maturation, we don't necessarily mean the same thing. There is a difference. So here we specifically want you to actually express the difference between growth and maturation. And as the point states, that we should see the difference, not just you stating the definition of the 2 terms, but you should actually be able to state the difference between the 2 terms. When, for example, when we look at growth, growth normally implies the increase in the physical size, the abilities, and the psychological maturation of a person. For example, in children, we see physical growth, which will, in most instances, it will include the changes in the weight of a child. It also shows the changes in the height of a child, and the growth of the head and the limbs of a baby, for example, and the overall physical change that a child will go through. That is growth. But when you talk of maturation, it has to do more with the behavioral changes that takes place when a person has matured. You can see that the change will be not necessarily in the physical appearance of the person, but that change would have taken place in the behavior of a person. That is maturation. And unlike growth, with maturation, it says here that it continues through adulthood, throughout your entire adulthood. It doesn't end. It doesn't come to a point whereby you can say your maturation has stopped. So these are the kind of differences that we want to see when you are stating the difference between a growth and maturation. So that difference should be there. The next point that I'll talk about is the issue of socialization. Socialization is such a broad term in our curriculum, and I will mention socialization. I do hope it comes in all our 3 exams. I might not have asked in the same way. It might not come as the definition of socialization, but as the concept of socialization will be incorporated in all our 3 exams. So it's very important that we understand what is meant by socialization. Let me just look at, for example, look at the issue of social development in children. If you talk about a child's ability to make and maintain relationships, that's part of socialization. If we talk about an adult who is able to form healthy relationships with other adults, that is also a sign of socialization. For example, we can also say that when a child is able to enjoy group games, and understand the concept of fair play with the other children or classmates in a classroom situation, or when they say the child is able to differentiate between fantasy and reality, but at the same time enjoy an imaginative game with other friends in the classroom or with classmates, then we talk of social development. And all these concepts are part of socializations. So please read more on the issue aspect of socialization. It's very important. It's a very important aspect of our curriculum. Please, you should be able to understand and you should be able to explain when we talk about the issue of socialization. All right. Let me just see if yeah, I'll come now to the part of malnutrition and balanced diet. These are also a very important aspect of development. We know that for a human being to be able to develop, nutrition is an important aspect of development, because we are talking about learner development in our subject of learner development, and nutrition is a very important aspect. So as you prepare for your exams, please do more research on the issue of malnutrition and balanced diet. And in this case, it's not really to differentiate between malnutrition and balanced diet, but you should be able to describe what is meant by a malnutrition as a condition. What is that the condition of malnutrition referred to? And when do we say that a person or a child is malnutritioned or is suffering from the condition of malnutrition? You should be able to state that. Of course, talk about the issue of deficiency of important vital nutrients in the body of a person, which may lead to the effects in the growth or the physical health or the behavior or the other functions of the body. That's in short what malnutrition is. Do not limit yourself with what I've just stated now on the issue of malnutrition. Please, you can go ahead and try to read more on malnutrition. As I've stated, your study guides have a lot of literature on malnutrition, but do not limit yourself to your study guides. You are free to consult any other book that has related information on nutrition in general. And we will now look at the issue of balanced diet. You should be able to state what is meant by a balanced diet. What are the important aspects of a balanced diet? For example, we talk about issues like proteins, issue of carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and other minerals in the body. For example, when you talk about fats, you should be able to describe what function or role fats have on a person's body. For example, you can say fats provide the energy that the body needs. And we talk about carbohydrates. We know that carbohydrates are the main source of energy for the human body, and all these aspects are part of what is called a balanced diet. So not only should you state what is meant by a balanced diet, you should be able to mention all the aspects of balanced diet, like I've just given a few examples here. And you should also be able to state how, for example, why the body needs proteins and what is the function of proteins in the body. These are all part of a balanced diet. All right. And for not only should you state the importance, you should also not maybe, but definitely we should be able to explain what will happen when the body lacks these important minerals or important aspects of a balanced diet. That will also lead us back to the issue of malnutrition. Okay, I'm now going on to part 2. The impact that HIV and AIDS has on education. The impact that HIV and AIDS has on not only on education, but also the impact that HIV and AIDS has on us as human beings, on our lives, on our communities, and also the stigma that comes with the issue of HIV and AIDS. As a teacher in your classroom, you should be able to know the impact that HIV and AIDS plays. If you do have a child in your classroom, for example, who is affected by the issue of HIV and AIDS in the home that they live in, the impact that this has on the child's life in the school system, those are all the aspect that HIV and AIDS has on the education of our children in our own classrooms, also in our communities. For example, we know that we should be able to explain as teachers the effect that HIV and AIDS has, for example, on how other children relate to other children who are affected or infected with HIV and AIDS. We should also, as a teacher, as teachers, be able to understand that HIV and AIDS plays a very big role, for example, in absenteeism in our own classrooms. We know that there can be a decline in school attendance due to the issue of parents of a child having who are infected by HIV and AIDS. It also be an issue whereby the child themselves are infected by HIV and AIDS, so the issue of school attendance can be affected them. And then we can also look at how even teachers themselves being affected or infected by HIV and AIDS can also limit their work, or can also distract their work schedules, because many times these teachers need to take time off from work due to issues that are caused by the effects of HIV and AIDS. And then we also have the issue whereby the lack of skilled teachers in our schools when HIV and AIDS has led to the issue whereby we have lost teachers due to the illness of a teacher or due to the death of a teacher. All these aspects need to be taken into consideration, so you need to be able to explain all this impact. The impact can come from a teacher's point of view or from a learner's point of view, but at the same time, again, you should be able to explain the impact that HIV and AIDS has on education. That's in general what I was referring there. And then we move on now to the household effects. They say here it says a discussion on how households are affected by HIV and AIDS. For example, when we talk about a household, in this case we can be referring to the breadwinner of the house is the one that is infected with HIV and AIDS, and due to that the person succumbs to the disease. What happens to the children in that home? What happens to the spouse that is left with the children? And at the end of the day, how does this lead to the overall development of the children in that household? So a discussion on that should be made, and yeah, and more examples, of course. The more you put examples on your discussions, the more you can put forth more clear explanations in your discussion, and this definitely will score you more marks. The next aspect on AIDS here, we have an analysis on how caregivers can give care for children affected and infected with HIV and AIDS. I hope as students you do understand the meaning of affected and infected with HIV and AIDS. When a person is affected, here we are referring to a person who has a close relative or a close family member, or could be a close friend who is infected with HIV and AIDS, and due to that infection, it's affecting you, who is a close family member. For example, we can talk of, like I just gave an example of a household where the parents are infected with HIV and AIDS, and as a result, the children are affected, because these children might miss a day of going to school because they have to take care of their ill parents due to HIV and AIDS. In a classroom setting, children can also be the affected part of HIV and AIDS when their teacher is the one who is infected with HIV and AIDS. And in this case, it can affect them in such a case that in such a way that they might miss from their own schoolwork because the teacher is not at school all the time, or even when they are at school, they might not be able to perform like they could have performed had they not been infected with HIV and AIDS. So this is what we mean by the affected. Of course, and the infected are the people who are living with HIV and AIDS. They might be living with it and be having illnesses, or they might be living with it and they might not be having access to all the medication that they require. These are the people that are infected with HIV and AIDS. So what do you mean by caregivers? It says here an analysis on how caregivers can help care for children affected and infected by HIV and AIDS. In most cases, in our own settings, in our communities, the usual caregivers that come in a home whereby the parents have succumbed to the HIV and AIDS are usually our extended family members. You have a case whereby an uncle or an aunt will come and take care of the children of his or her brother or sister's kids due to the issue of HIV and AIDS, whereby the parents of such kids might have died of HIV and AIDS. So these people normally become the caregivers or the immediate caregivers. In cases whereby there are no aunties or uncles, we have the issue of grandparents, and this normally happens in our own communities. So the grandparents have to take on the role of being the immediate caregivers when children are orphaned due to HIV and AIDS. So a discussion on what role will a grandparent play as a caregiver to children that have been affected by HIV and AIDS, for example, that discussion should be done. And as you are discussing that aspect, please put into consideration the fact that you are also looking at the issue of how education at the end of the day is being affected, because this is through education. We are being trained to become teachers. We will also put in the angle of education, how you are relating that aspect to the issue of education as a marker. I will be looking at that discussion from that angle of education. The next point we have in part 2 is the different strategies that have been used as a prevention intervention in HIV and AIDS. We have had so many over the years that we have been living with the issue of HIV and AIDS. We have had of so many prevention mechanisms. We have got the issue of condom use. We've got the issue of abstinence or behavior change. People are encouraged to abstain from unwanted sexual encounters to avoid the issue of HIV and AIDS. We have got the issue of people being encouraged to remain faithful to one faithful partner. Now we have got other issues whereby we have our own Ministry of Health is encouraging our male colleagues to go for male circumcision as one way in which HIV and AIDS can be prevented. Not the only way, but one of the ways that we can fight HIV and AIDS. All these are the different strategies that we can talk about. We have the issue of the prevention of the baby getting the virus from the mother through pregnancy. Those are also some of the strategies that we can mention here. There are a lot of them. You have to at least mention 3 or 4 of these different strategies, and then how they can actually be used to prevent the issue of HIV and AIDS, or the transmission of HIV and AIDS, or as an intervention to prevent HIV and AIDS. And you are free to add on more of the latest interventions. Now these days we hear of people are being immunized against HIV and AIDS. If you have more information on that, please, as long as you can substantiate your argument that this is a prevention strategy and you are able to explain it, please feel free to do so. And the more usage of examples in this case will actually earn you more marks. All right, I'll move on to unit 3. Okay, now we come to the concept of discipline. The main functions in teaching learners to develop self-concept. The concept of discipline and its main function in teaching learners to develop self-concept. Before I go on to helping learners develop self-concept, let's look at the concept of discipline on its own. In this question, or questions that are related to this aspect, before you tackle on the concept of positive self-concept, you should actually be able to talk a bit more on the concept of discipline. What is a discipline? Okay, I can just quickly give you a definition here. It says here that discipline is a positive learning affirmation that sets behavioral limits and guidelines to lead learners. So this is actually it sets your behavioral limits. When you say you are being taught discipline, it's a positive thing, it's not a negative thing. When someone is teaching you discipline, if they are doing it in a positive way, it's a good thing. That's why it's called a positive thing. And then it's there actually to guide. We are using discipline as teachers in our own classrooms. We are using discipline not as a punishment, but we are using it as discipline as a positive way in which we can actually set the limits of our own learners' behavior, so that we guide them to make good decisions in their lives, not only in the classroom but for the rest of their lives. That is what is meant by discipline there. So, and of course, the functions that teachers can use to develop positive self-concept. The idea of self-concept. When you use discipline, of course, like we said, we set for you as a teacher. What you are doing for the learner is that you are setting for them limits on their behavior. In so doing, you are actually helping the learners to develop self-control. We talk about it sets limits and correct misbehavior. So you can limit a person from misbehaving, and then you are also correcting their misbehavior. So as a teacher, you are going to encounter a lot of misbehavior in your classroom. But if you know that what you are doing in your classroom is to enforce discipline and self-control over your learners, you are going to positively correct this misbehavior in your classroom in such a way that you are encouraging your learners, you are guiding them, you are also helping them to feel good about themselves, and that they will even want to change for the better for their own good, to feel good about themselves. It also helps learners to learn rules, to respect the rules, to even set rules for themselves, and to develop a sense of what is right and what is wrong. So that's what we mean by the whole concept of self-discipline and self-positive self-concepts in our learners. All right. The episode in semantic memory as part of long-term memory. I'm not really going to give you the definition of episodic and semantic memory as part of the long-term memory. All I can say is that please read more on the issue of long-term memory. We have short-term memory explained thoroughly in our study guides. We have the short-term memory and the long-term memory. But in this case here, I've specifically mentioned that I will ask questions on long-term memory, and I'm looking at the episodic and the semantic memory as part of the long-term memory. Please read more on that. It's very important. Learners developing self-concept is the same thing as I mentioned earlier on part 3, and we look at the concept of information processing. What happens when for example, a person has learned a new information? How do they process this information? The learning process. It's important that as you prepare for the exams, you understand the whole concept of information processing, define the term information processing, and then go through all the steps that are needed for the information to be processed in a normal setting. Okay, I'll move on to the last part, which is now part 4, on the aspect of poverty and its role on the physical development of learners. Let me look at this. Okay, poverty is a very broad term as we know it. Poverty plays its part in many. Unfortunately, the issue about poverty now is that it plays negative roles in the lives of our learners, in the lives of teachers even, for example, because we know that when people are going through poverty, so many negative things do happen. But in this aspect now, the way this question, this point is put there, we are looking at the physical development of learners. So you relate poverty with the issue of physical development of learners. In this case here, if the point is about physical development of learners, the aspect, for example, of saying the child will not go to school, it's not directly related to the issue of physical development. Physical development here, we might talk about a child not having enough food to eat in the morning. The child comes to school, he or she does not have access to breakfast, and that affects their physical development. They will not be able to learn much in school, and they will not be able to actually attain what they should have attained had they come to school with good nutrition, for instance. It actually limits them to develop physically, with this issue of not having access to a balanced diet, for example, or not having access to good health care. The child has not been immunized against all these preventable illnesses due to their background of poverty, or poverty has hindered them from getting access to all the necessary medication that they require for them to grow in a good physical way. So that is the aspect that you are looking for when you talk about poverty and its role on the physical development of learners. So here you are equally required to discuss the challenges that a child would face, the physical challenge that a child will face if they live in poverty. the challenge that they will face to develop physically if they are living in extreme poverty. For example, I said the access to a balanced diet. It could be the access to good medical care. It could be access to preventable vaccinations against disease that can be prevented, for example, in such, or even access, just simple things like having access to clean drinking water. All this can lead to their to a challenges in their physical growth, or even access to good sanitation facilities. It can also lead to that. Okay, now let's look at the cause of the difference between to differentiate the cause of poverty and its impact on the development of learners. In this case here, we'll talk about the development of learners. Here we have not specifically talked about the physical development of learners, but we are just saying the development of learners in general. So here we can talk about how a child can develop in terms of their academic careers if a child is not able to write a test or an exam due to the fact that they are not able to pay for that exam, for example. Due to poverty, there's been an obstacle in a way for them to attain their academic development. That's one aspect that poverty can play in the general development of learners. If a child is deprived from joining the other children who are going for a educational excursion, for example, due to the fact that they can't pay for that trip, or they can't pay for that academic area, or I would say academic program, that can also be to poverty. So that can also be a discussion that you can tackle. You can handle that argument, that discussion from the angle of how poverty has actually been an obstacle in this child attaining their academic development. Okay, I'll move on now to the mechanism needed in order to reduce the impact of poverty on learners. When we're talking about what we're talking about here in terms of mechanism, we are actually looking at ways in which we can reduce poverty, or to reduce the impact that poverty has on learners. What can be done to help the learners to overcome these issues of poverty? Of course, in Namibia, we are so lucky that we've got free education for our primary school learners, our secondary school learners. So this is one of the strategies that have been put in place to reduce the impact of poverty on learners. Had we had a system that learners were deprived from coming to a school because they could not pay for their school fees, that would be a very big problem. But so that is one of the mechanisms that we can use in order to reduce the impact of poverty. One of the other aspects that we can look at, even though we are having a situation, despite the fact that we are having learners who do not have to pay school fees, we still have learners who actually come to classrooms. Most of you who are teachers already might have encountered learners who come to your classrooms that have not had breakfast in the morning. So some schools have what they call feeding programs. If you do not have a feeding program at your school, maybe you can work with your school and your community. You can work with your local businessmen in your own community to embark on the project of a feeding program to actually feed the learners that are coming from homes who have not eaten anything for the whole day, and they can come and have break time, they can have something to eat. That can play a very big role on how they respond to your work in the classroom, how they are able to learn, and how they can also fight off diseases, even because they will be having access to a meal that might even be the only meal that these children have access to the whole day. So it's one of the mechanisms. I'm not going to give you all the mechanisms. You have to go in your books, find out. There are many that are explained in your study guides. You are also free to look at other books written on ways to reduce poverty in the learners that you have. Okay, yeah, I think we have come to the end of our presentation. That is all, and I believe I've given you enough examples. I've tried as much as possible to explain. This is just briefly what you can expect for the 2019 exams, which includes your April-May exams, your August exams, and your November exams. I understand the November exams are supplementary exams, or if you do find yourself that you are writing the November exams, everything that I've mentioned here is included. So please do prepare well and read as much as possible on all the aspects that I've talked about here, and please Start studying when you have time, and don't do the last minute preparations, and avoid calling your tutor the night before the exams, because you are going to confuse yourself. You can call me anytime when you want to find out more on this. My cell phone number is 08128511424. I'll accommodate all your calls according to the IOL guidelines, rules. You know what time you're supposed to be calling us. You are told that information, and we do not expect you to call us the night before the exams or the morning that you are going to write, because you will not learn anything that day. But when there's still time, please do call. My email address is enchalezo@yahoo.com. You can also email me your questions, and I can attend to them. All the best for your exams.